Hey there guys, Tyler Garner here, and in this video today, I'm going to be showing you through this beautiful chart, if I do say so myself. This whole flow chart, what you're seeing in front of you today is our step-by-step 2021 testing framework, our accelerated testing to setting up automated rules to scaling framework we use for across all of our clients' accounts within the e-commerce space and also the digital product space, as long as it's direct response, and also what we're using for our own internal brands now as well. So what I wanted to do is kind of walk you through the step-by-step process of what that looks like. Some of you might have seen other videos in the past that were older and outdated. Some of them talk about CBO, some of them talk about ABO. This is the most relevant and up-to-date one. And as of 23rd of February, 2021, we are still in the pre-iOS 14 era before the changes all come out. So if the changes come and it means that we then need to change this approach, then this will change as well. And then you'll be able to see a new and updated video. But as of today, 23rd of February, this is the most relevant and up-to-date training I can give you about the systems we use to accelerate our testing process, rapidly test and rapidly scale our accounts with very little downside or very little questions or concerns, really. So we're about to go through all of this to help you understand if this is or isn't for you. Again, this is for e-commerce brands. Anybody who is basically spending money on Facebook ads, you can learn a lot from this. It's what I've done with this program, or what I've done with this chart in front of you today. This training is, I've really made an attempt to systemize and organize a somewhat creative process. Running ads is not easy by any means, and it takes a lot of creativity, but it also can be systemized and documented. It just takes a long time to really work out the kinks about what you can and can't do. So within this process, what you're going to see is there's going to be a lot of things that's open to interpretation, open to creative ideas where you can fill in the blanks. And that's the whole point. It's not supposed to be use this exact audience, use this exact age group. That's going to change based on every single account and also how times change. And so what I've done with this is overall structure and architecture, as opposed to do this exact step. So please follow along. We're going to start with the accelerated testing phase. We're then going to go down to the audience discovery phase. Then I'll move you over to the automated rules, show you a little bit about that. And then I'm also going to move you over to the top of funnel scaling so that you can understand a little bit around our scaling practices. And everything is sequential. We move left to right. Okay. So what you see is we start with the testing, then we go to the rules. We do not skip any of the steps. Any of these steps get skipped and it's all going to fall apart. You can't scale without rules. That is my belief. That is my experience. And that is what I've found to be the core reason why most people get stuck, based on the brands I've spoken to, around that $300, $500, maybe even up to $1,000 a day if they're lucky. You bring some rules in, you jack up the budgets, everything seems to stabilize. So again, let's start from the very beginning. Let's move over to the accelerated testing. I want to bring you over there now and let's go through it. So you will be able to get this whole cheat sheet, chart, flow program so that you can follow along. But this video is supposed to make it easier for you in order to digest it, because there's quite a lot here. And if I just gave you this, there's going to be a strong chance that you're not quite going to understand how to use it or how to use it best. So let's get into it. I'll try to keep this video as fast as possible. All right. So first things first, we're going to go through some summaries, go through some goals of what we want to achieve, and then also some audience priorities that I like to use. So as you're going to see, we've got a couple of different naming conventions that's important to be aware of. We have 3 different campaigns here, and they're color coordinated. The color coordination is purely to let you know what assets are the same and what assets are different, bar the ad sets, which again, I'll explain in a second. But top level view, the colors represent different variables. Different variables are important to distinguish because you need to understand that each campaign in this is extremely specific. Each campaign within our accelerated testing houses one specific unique variable, but the creatives are also different in their own sense. And so this is where the acceleration comes in, and it also becomes where the complication comes in. And so I want to help you understand that. Within each campaign is a different copy variable. So inside of that campaign, let's call it campaign 1. Let's say you've got a short copy variant, okay? Inside that campaign, no matter what ad you're running, you will always have the exact same copy variant. So now, if you ever want to know how is this copy performing versus the other copy, you can zoom out to the campaign level from this campaign, and then you can compare it against this campaign. You get to look at the overall, all audiences are factored into this, all creatives are factored into this. And what you get to do is you get to see the top line level, the difference between this copy variable and that copy variable. This copy variable here, campaign 1, and that copy variable, campaign 2. It might be a short copy versus long copy approach, okay? That's the whole reason that we split it out into cells or campaigns for each individual copy variable. And now let me explain the creative side. So you'll see these are all representative of ads. If you guys have seen the last demonstrations or the diagrams, it got very big and complex. And in order to keep this very simple, I've just made very simple circles here. So AS stands for ad set to avoid confusion. So we got ad set 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to go into those in a second. But before I allow any more confusion to set in, I want to explain what these circles represent. And again, they're all different ads. Now you might be wondering, if each campaign is housing one copy variable, well then what do the ads represent? Why are they different colors? And I'm glad you asked. Let me explain. Inside each ad variable, blue, green, yellow, these are all individual creative styles, meaning it could be a video, it could be a collection, it could be a carousel, it could be image, video, collection, carousel. Did I say all those? Or instant experiences. It could be anything. I might have missed some. Slideshow ads, for example, or it could be a completely different variable type. For example, if you've distinguished that inside the account that you're currently running, the brand that you own or the account that you're looking after, images work best than videos. It happens. I've seen it plenty of times. If you know that images work best, well, really, you're not going to try and force feed videos to an audience who don't respond to them. So you're going to use different images, right? So this doesn't need to be different creative types in the sense of video versus carousel versus images. When you're starting on a brand new account, it is worth testing that first because that can be a major needle mover because it is always dependent per account and per industry, whether people respond more to carousels, whether people respond more to videos or images. So that's extremely high on the priority scale of what you test, okay? If, for example, again, if you know that videos work best top of funnel or images work best because you've already got some context about this account, then that's fine. You're going to have 3 different image variables in here, and that's what's going to make these ads unique. They're all going to have the same ad, the same headline. They're all going to have the same copy. They're all going to have the same description, and they're all going to link to the exact same landing page. Okay, that's what the different the colors represent here. Now, inside the ad sets, if we can zoom out. Now, if any of this doesn't make sense, please pause the video and go back. There's a lot to get through, so I need to make sure I get through this as fast as possible because we're already nearly 8 minutes in. So the ad sets are really simple. Each of those are a different audience. Very, very simple. And I'm going to go through those in a second to show you the audience priority of what I like to see these audiences be and what we use as systems and processes within our own agency, the framework of the audiences that we like to use, okay? Because there is a bit of a flow to it. Now, you can change these as much as you like. You can use all different kinds of audiences that either you know that work or don't work or you want to test out. It's entirely up to you. This is how we like to launch an account from scratch. Or an account we've never worked on from scratch, and we are starting brand new idea, concept, ads, offer, you name it. We get to just start from scratch. This is our Hail Mary approach to get answers really quickly and also to accelerate our testing and scaling process as fast as possible. Now, what we do, if we come down, let me catch my breath. So the goal here is to find 3 to 6 winning copy creative audience combinations to progress to our CBO and ABO scaling campaigns. We use a mixture of both campaign budget optimization and ad set budget optimization in order to scale our campaigns, which is why that is our overall goal. The reason I've given goals within this breakdown and flow is purely because I know that if I can explain the why and help you understand the why of each step, you'll be able to better join the dots about what you need to do in order to make this work for you, okay? So as you can see, 3 campaigns, 3 copy variables. All audiences are the same. Ad set 1 is audience 1. Ad set 1 is audience 1. Is the exact same audience here. Is the exact same audience here. Meaning they're the same ages. Meaning it's the same placements. Meaning it's everything. If this interest group was dogs, for example, well, it's going to be dogs all the way through. If this one's parrots, then ad set 2 is parrots all the way through, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, we have a priority of what we like to use as lookalike audiences more than the other. And what you'll see here is stacked 1 to 6. Because again, there's 6 ad sets. Now you can use more, you can use less. It's entirely up to you based on budgeting and also what audiences you can come up with. I like to say with 6, but again, I like to keep these open and broad to give you as much creative freedom as possible to make these work for you. So the first one, is a lookalike 1% stack. Now, this is quite literally 1% of your best audiences or your best lookalikes. This could be initiate checkout, add to cart, website visits, time on page, 4% page views for those who are aware of how to find the top 4% page view count. It could be highest purchase value. It could be overall purchases. You name it, it is a 1% stack of all of the top audiences that you want to use. And you keep doing it to be able to increase the size of your overall audience. Now, if you're in a smaller country, for example, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, or maybe just a single European country, your population might be a bit smaller. So 1% might not work for you. You might need to use a 3% stack. But the whole purpose is to use a very small lookalike audience, your highest potency, but in a big cluster and group, meaning it's the highest potency of a cluster of a powerful audience. And this tends to work time and time again. The next one is a lookalike 5% purchase stack, semi-stack of all of your purchases. So the way this works is this might be just a standard 30-day count of your last purchases. It could be included with an export of all of your Shopify sales in total, 5% stack of those. And then also the overall pixel lookalike audience that you can create as standard. So those are 3 different lookalike audiences altogether. If you need any clarification on that, please drop a comment. Happy to help. But those are the 3 that I tend to use to stack together when it comes to a purchase audience. The interest stack then is a matter of finding all of the best interests or all of the ones that you think are going to work best if you do not know the answer to this, and stacking them all together based on relevance and also using audience insights in order to find the relevance or potency. Again, there's plenty of tips and tricks into there, but that's going to be another training for another time. The 4th one is going to be broad targeting engaged shoppers. This is quite simple. This is just to give Facebook as much control and see how your offload creative, everything really resonates with a broader crowd and see how it performs. And each copy variable and each image variable that you use can impact differently with a broader audience. So it's important to have those different kinds of tests. Now, again, the last 2 is a single, or if you really wanted to add more in, you can have 2 to 3 high relevance interests, but you expand it. Facebook at the moment are preaching liquidity. All they want to see is more and more people using expanded lookalikes, expanded interest groups, larger audiences, basically give the machine as much power as possible in order to serve the ads to who they think is going to work best. And so I've seen a lot of success with expanded audiences, and I would advise you to try it for yourself. And it tends to work better for me than not using it these days. And the last one's actually quite interesting. So what I like to do here is use what is typically a warm audience, but these are for your cold variables. Now, the reason I like to do this is because after really that day 31 to 90, they might as well be cold. The reason I don't do 180 is there's no reason to go back that far. The audience should be big enough within the 90-day range, and I still want to have some kind of relevance just to see what the response rate's like on the ads that we're running, on the tests that we're running. So audience 6 is one where I'm not giving you the creative freedom. It's more so just telling you this is the audience we use. It is 75% video view, engage with Facebook and Instagram and your website visitors from day 31 till day 90, meaning you have to exclude site visitors 30 days. And within this, I'm still testing with and without. I've seen a lot of success by excluding all of your website visitors over the last 7 days and anyone who's engaged with your Facebook or Instagram in the last 3. But to tell you the exact numbers, it would be almost impossible. So that's something worth testing out. Exclusion audiences being in there, like set standard exclusion audiences in versus exclusion audiences out. Other people have commented different fluctuations in performance and whatnot. So that's the overall goal when it comes to the testing aspect. This is our accelerated testing process, right? So what it results in is within 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, however long you want to give it, we now have 6 audiences tested, 3 copy variables tested, and 3 creative types tested. Now, if you've got the budget to permit it, you can test more variables faster or more, within this. So that could be, you might go above 6 audiences. You might go more than 3 or 4 variables. You might even go more copy tests than just this. But to give it some context, I don't like to set budgets any less than 1.5 to 2 times the standard cost per purchase amount. And so if you use that math, and let's say you're averaging a $30 cost per purchase, we'll typically start our campaigns around $50 a day. The reason we do that is we're following mathematics. If you're averaging a $30 cost per purchase, you're going to expect at least 1 sale from $50 in spend, probably 2 if it's going to be be a good performer, right? $50 is just safe. You do that across 6 ad sets, you're looking at $300 a day. You do that across 3 campaigns, you're looking at $900 a day. This is just in testing. Now, you can spend more, you can spend less. But what I'm trying to explain is if you wanted to have 10 ad sets per 3 audiences, it can start to rack up price, quite expensive. And if you're testing and you don't have the risk tolerance or the capacity to spend a lot on testing very quickly to get faster answers, some will work, some won't. That's testing. Then I would advise to have less audiences and keep as many creative variables in circulation as possible. Now, hopefully that all makes sense. If not, then please rewind the video. But that's all I'm going to really go about with the accelerated testing process. Again, this is using all complete cold variables. This is as though we're not using anything new. We want to test audiences, creative copy. And again, you can be creative with this. You can use audiences you know with variables you don't know. You can use variables you know, finding audiences you don't know. And I'm about to explain that in a second. But just so you can understand the concept behind it, we isolate the copy. The reason we isolate the copy is so that we can understand at a campaign level how the copy is impacting, which copy is impacting the performance the most. Meaning we're going to be looking at CTR, we're going to be looking at overall CPMs, we're going to be looking at overall return on ad spend, we're going to be looking at all of the metrics along the way so that we can understand how is this impacting our campaigns. Return on ad spend is just not enough these days. If we can find top of funnel copy that is getting us a 5% CTR outbounds, that'd be fantastic. But if it means that it wasn't backing out profitably, probably means that we're saying something wrong that's raising curiosity, but not closing them. Doesn't mean that that angle's not going to work. What it does mean, though, is we might need to work harder once they get to the sales page or the landing page or the product page based on the copy that we've given them. Typically, we'll just move it to the side and say, not what we need, but it's always a matter of assessing the data and understanding what did work and what didn't work. And we'll explain that a little bit further as well. What I want to move on to now is coming down to the audience discovery and how we use the current assets that we have, the current variables that we have that we know that work, and how we run a testing campaign. Then I'm going to walk you through the steps. So as in, once we go from our rapid accelerated testing, then we move on to audience discovery, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll walk through the steps in a second. But right now, all I want to show you is, again, our audience testing, discovery testing kind of framework. All it is the same framework that you saw above, meaning the same process, same flow, but it's one campaign. The reason we use one campaign is because within this campaign, we're housing the variables we already know that work, meaning we can't run this until we actually know that we've got copy, creative, etc. that's already working. The whole premise is that we have a dedicated campaign just for rapid firing new audiences and to come up with new ideas. It might be isolated placements. It might be stories only. It might be, it might be lookalikes and interests and gender only or age only. You name it, you can test a whole bunch of different audiences in here. And basically all you're doing is you're controlling the test to be able to isolate it, look into it, knowing that if you're averaging a certain amount based on your winning campaigns, like a certain amount of return on ad spend, a certain amount of cost per purchase, you know what your baseline KPIs are based on that. You can test new audiences against your control metrics and control each audience individually. Again, this isn't rocket science. This isn't anything new. This is just kind of how we categorize it so that you can see once we do have variables we know, we can actually use them for more tests rather than testing. We don't need any more answers from them about whether the creatives work, the copy, the image, etc. But we can use it to find new audiences. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, as you can see, goal, find your audiences, blah, blah, blah. Again, you can go through this in more detail step by step once you get the sheet. You will get this sheet. So moving forward, once you've done or you've set up at least the accelerated testing, there's some different things, right? So the ad test, 3 different creatives. Again, these are all just more information for you to understand. You can give it to a media buyer, an in-house guy, or for yourself, just so that you don't forget. You don't need to always refer back to this video if you don't want to. So once you've found the winning creative videos, winning creatives, again, you'll see this is an optional path once you've got those variables, okay? Optional. Now, the next part, you'll get a link to this. You'll be able to see these. I actually have never given these ones away, and I might create a video to show you what it looks like. But again, once you get this sheet, it will be linked to the appropriate one. This just has client information, and I don't really want to share that on this video because I don't know where this video is going to end up. So what I want to do is tell you that within this will be hyperlinked and this will be hyperlinked, and you guys will have some forms and sheets that you can fill in. And again, I'll probably create a video so that you guys can understand how to best use it. But it's a matter of including all of the details you could possibly need for your winning creative details inside that folder but that's only for the creative. It's where we store everything. It's, what works for the client is image, video, what is the post URL, all of that kind of stuff. Any information that we might need to be able to reflect on and fall back to, we're updating this almost weekly in order to make sure that any new discoveries that we make, it's all documented. That way we can always look back at it, so we're not recreating a same test that we've already tested once before. And this same rule applies for winning audiences, okay? We want to know what audience works, what age, what didn't work, that kind of thing. We need to know those details because it's not enough just to know what did work in a test. It's also important to know what didn't work in a test so that we don't create the same issue, which just costs us or our clients money. Make sense? As you can see, within the winning variables test or finding new audiences, if we do find a new audience, again, just follow the steps up to yes, make sure that you add it into this winning audience spreadsheet so that you don't lose track of it. There is nothing worse than having to try and recall what audiences have worked for you in the past. If you know that there was this one interest group or this one lookalike that worked so well, or this one combination that worked really well, and you can't remember what campaign it was in or what, when you used it or where to find it or what some of the specifics were, it happens all the time. And so I created this sheet out of my own frustration because I think I can store everything in my head until I forget it. And then I get angry at myself for forgetting. So this is for people like me who think that they can store everything in their head. It's a great way to just brain dump it all. So that's for you. Now, one thing that I just want to bring to your attention on this, if you don't find a new audience, you turn off the losing ad sets, that's basic. You set an end date on an ad set, again, that's basic. For midnight the next day so that it doesn't keep running because depending on the account and the maturity of the account, there's most likely going to be rules that are going to turn this ad set back on the next day. So it's important that we set the end date for midnight tomorrow because even when rules turn the ad set back on, it just doesn't deliver. It's perfect. But please, I want you to pay attention to this here, okay? You need to keep note of the losing KPI. We want to know the metric of what caused this to lose. For what specific audience caused the metrics to not make sense? Was it CPM? Was it an expensive audience to run with? Was the CTR low, meaning they didn't care, meaning that audience isn't relevant? Was it that the audience itself had a really good click-through rate, but the people that went there just had a really low conversion rate, meaning that there was curiosity. The ads worked for that audience, but they need to see something a little different. It begins to open up the category of psychographics where you get to understand your market on a more emotional level and understand what drives them and what doesn't. But just because you've got winning variables and this is an audience that should work doesn't mean it's always going to work for them. Hopefully that makes sense. And again, little note here as to why. Okay, so let's move on to some fun stuff. After we've added all of our creative variables into it, then we obviously need to be able to trim out the fat, meaning any ages that don't work, any genders that might not work, placements, etc. Don't do anything too micro. I don't want you to refine this down to news feeds only for 57 to 60-year-olds. That's not what this is about. This is about anything where you can see that it's spent $200, didn't get a single sale, and it's just been hogging budget and it's not worth our time. We just cut that shit out. That might be based on placements. That might be based on ages, genders, whatever, right? It's important to just assess that before we move on to any form of scaling, anything like that at all, okay? Now, let's talk about some rules, because automated rules, for those who may or may not know, in my opinion, is the most important part of scaling any paid campaign whatsoever. You cannot scale an account with Facebook based on the way this machine is, based on the volatility that we experience on an ongoing basis without some automated rules, because how people could possibly sleep at night knowing there's $10,000 budgeted to spend on a day and not have any rules that in case, for whatever reason, Facebook shut the bed and performance went to shit, that you spent $7,000 with only 3 sales. I mean, I personally couldn't sleep at night with that, but I've personally spent, $14,000, I think, on the highest end in a day on my own accounts, and I could do that with confidence because I knew that there was rules in place, that nothing was going to overspend and it wasn't just going to fall back and crash burning to the ground. There was rules to prevent any kind of excessive spending, any kind of bad shit happening. Again, there's some notes here, so please feel free to read and understand what's going on there. The whole goal, again, we have goals for everything just so you can understand the why behind it, not just the how. Our rules are a safeguard, stop loss, etc. Okay. Now, rules are really finicky. Rules are a very hard thing in order to set as a stock standard, because every account's different. When the peaks in performance are different, when the troughs in performance is different. And so it's really important to understand that I've tried to make these rules as specific as possible while still being as broad as possible so that it works for every single account. Okay. First one, and there is color coordination to this. So I want you to understand what this is. Green is on, red is off. Very basic, very easy. So green is at the top and red's below. So anything that we're going to turn on the next day, it's important that you know that these are turn on rules because, well, you need them to turn on by midnight the next day. The big one here for me is the midnight rule. Now, this is if it spent more than $5 yesterday, turn it back on. Now, there is a bunch of other ways to do a midnight turn back on rule. Some people use naming conventions so that when you change the name, it just turns off, and that's perfectly fine to do that. Personally, though, I like to use a spend rule because what I do, and again, you can take note of this because it does work, is that if performance has gone bad and you know that it has stayed bad and it's not getting any better, then what you're able to do is reduce the budget down to $1 a day. That's going to signal to Facebook that you've got small budgets, meaning it's going to enter into the auction at a very, very, very cheap prices, meaning that even if your rules turn it on the next day, it's okay to spend because it's only going to be spending $1. But also because it's such a low bid, you may actually sweep up a sale because it's bidding so low because it only needs to spend $1 in a day. Okay. Then it's also whenever you do get the chance to actually come and groom through the account and find what ones that you need to turn off based on wanting to turn them off in the past. You might have a $1 a day campaign that's been running for 3 days and you go, oh shit, I was supposed to turn that off. Well, fortunately, it's only spent $3. And in that time, it might have picked up a sale. So your ROAS is through the roof. You can take a screenshot and sell a guru course. It's fantastic. That's a joke. Don't do that. The next ones that we have that are turned back on. Again, there's a lot of acronyms here. I hope that those who are watching this can understand the acronyms. I will speak through it as well, just in case you don't understand. So these are all-day rules, just so you understand that there is no set custom times. In a lot of the accounts that I do work on, there are custom times, but that is so customized and dependent on the account. I can't actually tell you that there's a specific, yes, it's at 9:30 a.m. every single time without fail, or 6 a.m. or at 1 p.m. do this and that, because every account's different and you need to customize it and tailor it to the account based on when your account peaks and troughs. And again, that is my belief and something I've seen work very, very well for me and other accounts. So the next part to this is we have an all-day campaign for when your cost per purchase is less than your estimated KPI and your return on ad spend is above your KPI, or at the very least break even. Because if your cost per purchase is below what you expect for the day, but for some reason it's turned off, it means a sale has come through at some point, and well, you want an account that's performing within KPI to be running. And so it's going to be turned back on. So it kind of saves your ass in case there's a delayed sale for whatever reason. The next one is if your return on ad spend on its own, so this isn't factored by your cost per purchase, because your cost per purchase might be a little bit above, but if you've made money on it, meaning you've actually appealed to a more profitable audience, then you will turn that back on based on the fact that it's above a certain KPI. Now, personally here, I would recommend being 30% above your break-even KPI. So if you're looking at 2, go to 2.6 for the day. Reason being, that gives you enough buffer, enough comfort to know that it's a really well-performing ad set and it probably shouldn't be turned off at any point. And this might not ever actually run, but it kind of covers you just in case, I don't know, there's some kind of glitch and someone's bought a shitload of stuff, or you've got some really high-value customers coming through for the day, and you want to make sure that you can keep appealing to that high-value customer. Coffee break. Okay, the next one, post-sales peak. So this is really important. Now, I've made another video in the past. You may or may not have seen it depending on who you are and where you're seeing this video. But I've made another video in the past that shows you that every account has its own peaks and troughs. Sales peaks, most people I've found are in the morning, while a lot of people are there's also other people who are in the afternoon. Okay, slight break there. So some of you may or may not have seen another video of mine in the past that talks about, other accounts having certain spend peaks and troughs. Now, that is not, I don't have the time to be able to explain that video today if you haven't seen it, but basically every account is different when it spends more and when you typically get more sales is in a nutshell. And you want to be able to set rules based on just after your peak period, you know that you should have a certain amount of sales or at a certain price, meaning if it's way above average at that time, you need to set rules to be able to cut that stuff off because it's not performing too average to what you're used to. Okay. The way I like to set my rules, I personally see a strong correlation between initiate checkout, or your cost per initiate checkout, and your cost per purchase. For those that have been built on Shopify, with the new addition of the Shop Pay, it actually creates an issue where the initiate checkout doesn't always fire, because if they go through the Shop Pay checkout, which just means that they've got an account either with Shopify, with that account, or somewhere else, that it can actually log them straight back in with their details preloaded. And for whatever reason, it doesn't actually fire the initiate checkout event, meaning we're stuck with the cost, the add to cart costs as our closest variable, only because the initiate checkout doesn't fire all the time. So if you are one of those people who the initiate checkout event doesn't fire as much as you know it should, then you will need to fall back to the add to cart event, or the cost per add to cart, as your closest correlation event in order to turn it off. But I'll explain that more as I need to. So post-sales peak in the automated rules is going to be around above 50% average. So this typically reflects for those who have their peak period in the morning. Now, the reason you want this to be a little bit loose is because you still want your account to run for the most of the day. You want it to get most of its spend. You're setting a budget because you want it to spend it because you expect it to perform. But for example, if your cost per initiate checkout is greater than, say, 50%, say you're used to getting, I don't know, $15 cost per initiate checkouts, and then you start getting $22, $50 initiate checkout costs at the end of the day, that's going to have an effect on your bottom line, your total ROAS for the day. So what you will want to do is have a rule like this that turns it off, because typically, and by all means, you guys might see it differently, but from my experience across many different campaigns, many different industries, if something starts bad for the day, it typically stays bad for the rest of the day. So I tend to just want to cut things early, let the budget go elsewhere, or maybe just save the money because it's not going to come back for any reason whatsoever. And that's what the rules are for, is really just to save our ass there. If it's a campaign budget optimization campaign, even better. It might be pushing $1,000 a day, and we turn an ad set off that was starting to hoggle the budget, and now it can reallocate whatever budget's left for the day into a better performing ad set, or one that may perform better. Okay. And so there's a few different variables in this. Again, CPIC is going to be cost per initiate checkout, CPP is cost per purchase, and then ROAS is ROAS. You should all know that. But basically, the essence is, if our initiate checkout is higher by 50% as a rough number, this is pure arbitrary numbers to an extent. Like, we want it to be loose. Now, the biggest thing I want you to walk away with from this is, when we set up rules, it is important that you have loose rules to begin with. If you could, you can either set up tight rules and say, oh, well, I know my initiate checkout averages at 15, and therefore if it's 17, I want to turn it off. That won't work, because what you'll do is you'll choke out performance. That's too close to your overall average that's not going to help you spend your full budgets and allow for the fluctuations day to day of Facebook. Okay. What you would rather do is have around 50%, and then just have a few rules that are rolling throughout the day to prevent any overspending. And again, this is where it starts to become customized. You start with a wider net, and you slowly bring it in based on looking at the account on a daily basis to be able to see, hey, this one shouldn't be running because the performance is really bad. Why is this still running? You'll see, oh, I can see that the initiate checkout's running, but it should have been turned off because I can see it's just creeped over. Okay, maybe we can start tightening in the cost per initiate checkout rule, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the kind of process that we go through about refining the rules. You set a wide net, and you just kind of slowly bring it in and constrict it based on knowing that a lot of poor performing ad sets are still slipping through. Okay, so it's a constant refinement process. And again, something to note that I experienced this year that you definitely want to be aware of is that during, say, Q4, where CPMs get really expensive, you might want to actually relax these rules even further, because, well, with a rise in CPMs, it can typically rise the cost of everything else. And so you might want to adjust your rules accordingly, knowing when some seasonal CPM spikes occur. Otherwise, your rules will be turning ad sets off maybe a little bit too earlier. Again, that is too hard to be able to give you as a broad or a specific answer. It's got to be as broad as possible so that most people can take this away and actually implement something from it. And again, all these rules are here. I don't want to go through too much. There's safety net purchases, safety net initiate, checkout, add to cart. Now, what you might find is that, what you should find, even with yourself, is that a lot of these are almost redundant. And I say almost redundant because they complement one another, or they might do the same event, but they're either excluding, it might be, for a key example, This is cost per purchase being under a certain amount, including return on ad spend. But this is return on ad spend just on its own. That would almost be considered a redundancy, but at the same time, different performance can create different results. So it's important to have a few different factors in there and think to yourself, what might this miss? If you're doing something like spend is over a certain amount per day, do you want to have, if spend's greater than $50 and initiate checkout 0 to turn it off? Do you want it to be over $30 and initiate checkout equals 0 to turn it off? You need to think one step ahead as well and think, well, what if the initiate checkout didn't fire, but I still got a sale somehow? Well, you might want to add a contingency that it's like, spend greater than 30, initiate checkout is 0, but return on ad spend is greater than 2. That wouldn't work unless you got a sale. So you can kind of have that as a contingency that it's going to turn it back on, right? Anyway, hopefully that makes sense. Rules are very complicated, takes a lot of time. Happy to geek out on it. Leave comments if you've got it, but I don't want to spend too much time here. Otherwise, I could spend a whole hour just here explaining these in a bit more depth. But please pause, read, ask questions. Happy to help as we go along. The final one that we've got that a lot of people like. Now, this one is relatively broad compared to how you might have seen it in the past. There's so many different ways to skin the cat, so many different ways to scale a campaign that it can become complex, confusing, or really just polarizing. You just don't know where to start and what's right and what's wrong, especially when the gurus try and get a hold of it and tell you that there's a million ways to scale. Honestly, I find it very simple. I try not to overcomplicate it. I use a mixture of auto bid and lookalikes, auto bid and manual bids, cost cap, basically all the tools that Facebook has available. None of this, I personally, again, solely believe that you cannot do this without automated rules, mostly because the automated rules allow you to set really large budgets and it controls performance. If you can't scale, even with automated rules in place, either your rules are going to be too strict or there's other, it's all math. There's something wrong going on with your campaign, but these are the campaigns that I use. Again, these are the campaigns I've used to scale very, very successfully. I've had multiple accounts all up above that $10,000, $15,000 a day mark. So, I can say this with confidence. It's not theory based on reading a book or, speaking with a Facebook rep. So please know that this is all battle tested with both clients' money and my own money. So I've put my own money on the line for these tests, if that's any consolation at all. And I want you to understand that, again, you can use one of these methods, you can use all of these methods, but there is a priority to this, and I have listed this below as well. So I'm going to go into those in a second. Again, there's different steps. I want you to understand the summary so you can understand all the different motions that are in play here, or all the thought processes behind it, okay? Things like each CBO should have a minimum of 4 ad sets and a maximum of 10. That's got a lot to do with automated rules and also making sure that the budget spends enough, as well as making sure it doesn't get spread too thinly, okay? Now, the priority I want to go through, because I think it's really important, it is based on, number 1 being the highest priority, number 6 being the lowest priority. So number 1, CBO auto. This might sound silly. A lot of people like to use CBOs with manual bids and everything else. And I can understand that because it does work extremely well. But something that I've found consistently reliable has been CBOs on auto bids. And again, the minimum that I typically work with when it comes to a quote unquote scale campaign is going to be around 10 times the average cost per purchase, so that you know that you should average at least 10 sales. If things work, then you jack up the budgets, and I'll go through some intraday motions in a second. The next one's going to be cost cap. I actually prioritize cost cap over bid cap. I still think cost cap works better. Sometimes you do run into delivery issues, but on the days that it delivers full budget and it performs extremely well. It may need to fluctuate based on obviously how auction fluctuates, as well as CPMs fluctuate, because it's trying to balance your cost, not so much your bid. Okay. Then there's bid cap. Again, bid cap I'm still playing around with, but it is something that we use. And when I say I'm playing around with bid cap, I mean that a lot of the time it works well, other times it doesn't work so well. So I can't say with confidence that I've seen absolute success with bid cap the way I have seen with CBO and with cost cap and auto bids. However, it does work, and I have still used it quite successfully. Now, the other ones is Adsense Budgets. And again, these can be used in conjunction. You might just use campaign budget auto and Adsense Budget auto, and that might be all that you're really comfortable spending while you've got every other campaign running within your ad account. So this is to be used at your discretion. This is my personal priority. You don't need to have all 3 CBOs running before you move on to 3 ABOs, but just so that you can understand, this is the priority of what I prefer. So again, the next, after we've done all of our CBOs, is going to be ABO. The reason I don't like to use ABO over CBO, because I know that question is going to be coming, is purely based on being able to scale. You want to set a $5,000 a day budget. That's perfectly fine. You can do that much easier on a campaign level than you can on an ad set level. Because if you set a $5,000 or even $1,000 budget on an ad set, but it spends it all and then the rules kick in and it's off by 3 o'clock, there's a lot of budget left over that it didn't spend on 3 o'clock. Let's call it 8 a.m. in the morning. There's a lot of budget that it didn't spend. That's an issue, especially if you're trying to hit spend numbers so that you can hit a certain amount of revenue. You need to be able to fix that. Well, with CBOs, you're able to do that. It just reallocates that budget elsewhere. And normally one of them is going to perform well. So I find CBO better for larger budget campaigns like that. With that being said, I have seen some success with ABO scaling and they do still work. It can just take more effort and it definitely needs more attention, given that it can change on an ongoing basis and you might need to start turning ad sets off or duplicating them and start playing around with that. But these, again, based on a priority, ad set budgets, auto, cost cap, big cap, etc. These are all different ones I've used. Cost cap, auto, definitely my preferred, and then big cap comes in. And when I big cap, I typically do the, what others would call the bully method, which is just anywhere between 3 to 5x, just skyrocket the bid and really just push it. And if it performs, fantastic. If it doesn't, after 3 days, I tend to kill it myself. 3 or 4 really just depends on what the other metrics look like. You might see really cheap initiate checkouts and really expensive purchases. And so it's a matter of adjusting that. Now, the overall goal of this, just so you understand, is if we're seeing positive results after the initial peak period, usually in the morning. So again, this works really well for morning peak accounts. Okay, we're going to increase the budgets anywhere by around 50 to 100%. This is why also I really like campaign budgets, because if you've got a $5,000 a day budget set on a campaign and it's working really well in the morning, you can bump it anywhere from $7,500 to $10,000 a day. And from my experience, most of the time it spends either all of it or very close to. So it's a huge win. Where typically ad sets tend to not spend all of it. It doesn't accelerate as quickly. Or as you accelerate it, if, for example, your costs blow out and your rules kick in, that whole budget's done for the day. In campaigns, it reallocates it elsewhere and it tends to just keep on trucking. Okay. Again, that's why I prefer CBO for scaling as opposed to ad set budgets. So again, this is where a bit of discretion comes in. The budget increase should be based on how far above our performance is above the minimum KPI we've got set. So for example, if our average ROAS is around 2.3 for cold traffic, and after the peak period in the morning, we know our return on ad spend is around 3, that's a pretty solid performance. And so for me, I would feel very comfortable to increase the budget by 100%. So double it and allow it to just keep accelerating that spend and keep pushing with that performance. And again, from my experience, I've seen it just hold very, very consistently. It might shake the tree a little bit on some days. Some days you might accelerate it too soon and it could throw things off. But again, that's why we've got rules to prevent anything that might start to go south. It gets cut before it can start hogging too much budget and spending way too much. Okay. And again, so what I want you to understand about the campaign builds here is that this is how it could look within the account. This is architecture. Again, this is all of our winning audiences, ad set audience 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it might be, with all of our winning ad sets. With all of our winning ads. Ideally, you want to have between 3 to 6 at the minimum winning ads so that there's enough creatives to cycle through so that one doesn't burn out faster than the other. 3 is probably on the low end, depending on how much you're spending. But if you're up around that 5 to 10,000 a day, you want to allow your audience to see a different amount of variety, especially while you've got really high budgets. Even if one ad ends up with $500 in spend for the day, just one ad, you want to make sure that there's enough variety that it can enter into different auctions and enter, different creatives can be shown to your audience overall. But yeah, so that's pretty much it, guys. I know it's been a long video. I really appreciate you guys sticking around. It is a lot more simplified approach. The testing is extremely accelerated, even just discovering audiences. The premise of it, the logic behind it is very simple. It's about controlling your variables. It's understanding, having a way to isolate every single test, every single variable that you're working on, and knowing exactly which variable moved the needle the most, which creative, which copy, which audience, etc. You can know everything based on this setup. And then about scaling, it's a mixture of horizontal plus vertical scaling together. And again, these are things that have worked very, very well for me across clients' accounts, for myself. And so I can say this with confidence that this stuff works. But it's not to be overcomplicated. If you're not scaling now, you've never really made it, there's probably more going on than say it's just a Facebook issue. If you're a big thing that I tell people a lot, and I want you to know this before I wrap this video up, is that if you're not scaling now, or if things haven't been working for the last month or 2 months, they're not just going to miraculously change. There's something fundamentally flawed within your approach. There's other videos I've shot, and they may be in circulation, they may not. That is in relation to every account has a telltale sign about why they can't scale. And there is answers in the data. You just need to find it. You need to find where the biggest hole is and whatnot. And if that video is in circulation by now, you may be able to find it. But again, that's a video for another time. But if you're not scaling now, it's got a lot to do with the audiences, the creative, the copy, the landing page. The numbers are all there. But if you want to rapidly test audiences, creatives, copy, and you want to just have an accelerated way to move through all new variables as fast as possible, and so that you've always got a fresh pile of creatives, then this is the best way to do that. You're going to have winning creative audiences as a storage. You're going to be able to store all of your winning audiences, your winning creatives. There's a rule framework here as well. So if you've got any questions about any of this, please let me know. Thanks for sticking around. It's been a long video. Hopefully this all makes sense. If you guys have any questions whatsoever, feel free to comment below. I'm here to help. But thanks for watching. Until next time.